Phantasy Star is a series with quite a lot of history to it. Phantasy Star as a whole started out as a series of RPGs on the Sega home consoles. The theme was heavily based in science fantasy, where magic and technology were heavily intertwined. While the lore is related among certain titles, each sub-series has its own distinct story and canon, even if they do share certain items and terminology between all of them. The original Phantasy Star game was released for the Master System on December 20th, 1987, in Japan, and the success of this role-playing series would spark a saga that would stretch all the way to present day. Phantasy Star 2 would get its release in 1989, and another game, Phantasy Star 3, would come out just a year later in 1990, with the quadrilogy coming to an end with Phantasy Star 4 releasing in 1993. This game series was beloved enough that it got compilations, spin-offs, and even enhanced remakes until Phantasy Star Online was released for the Dreamcast in 2000. Spin-offs and new titles for home consoles were released all the way until 2018. But we're here to talk about the MMO, right? The original Phantasy Star Online 2 is a free-to-play MMO that was developed and published by Sega. It originally released in Japan back in July of 2012, and went through various other releases and versions on home consoles and portable devices. The game would not release outside of Asia until August 5th of 2020, where the game was released for PC and the Xbox One. In 2021, Phantasy Star Online 2 got a massive update called New Genesis, which revamped the gameplay, graphics, and overall content of the original game, and it was considered a shared universe, but overall a completely different experience. While this update was an entirely new game, Sega made it compatible for characters that were already made and playing within the original version. Now, usually when a company does an overhaul like this, it's because the game is dying, or fading, or it switches companies. But I can't really say that this was the case with PSO2. The player base was steady and the game itself was a commercial success. It could have been due to the game's age, and while a facelift might have made more sense, I suppose making something entirely new wasn't really a bad idea if the older version could still be played with cross-compatibility with New Genesis. Regardless, I couldn't find too much on this decision without some deep diving. I never really played the original version, and I hopped into New Genesis due to a friend who claimed that PSO2 was her first MMO, and one that was very close to her heart. I originally played the game on my Xbox, and then would later try it again on the PC. So what did I think about it? Well, let's just go over it. As far as visuals and sound goes, New Genesis is not a bad-looking game. It has clean cinematics and really catchy music to boot. I found myself enthralled with the opening cutscene before you get to the main menu, and it really got me excited to play the game. Even the character creator was extremely in-depth, with every part of your character being customizable, in a way not seen in many MMOs. I had a blast creating a character that I thought looked pretty unique, and I loved that what I had made was just awesome, until I realized that the way I positioned the mouth meant that her mouth was always open, making her look like a complete dork during the cutscenes. The story of this game, though, is very confusing. So I already have trouble following plots that become way too scientific, but when you add in a fantasy element and a deep lore that concerns games that I've never even played before, it becomes all the more confusing for me. Granted, you don't have to play the other Phantasy Star games, and the plot is actually meant to be a little confusing at first. But even after I learned more and played more, I still felt lost. You are something in the story known as a meteor. You're a person that has fallen from space, and neither you nor anyone else knows why this is happening. Meteors like you have been falling from the sky for a while, and while no one really knows why this is happening, they're all very comfortable and pretty cool with it, because the meteors have been helping humans in a battle against enemies known simply as the dolls. Just like with the meteor, no one really knows where the dolls came from, or why they suddenly started to attack the planet. But it has been made pretty clear that the meteor's only purpose is to fight off these enemies, so you know the two are intertwined. I would go into more details, but I don't want to spoil too much. You can just tell that there's a deep lore here. New Genesis takes place 1,000 years after the original PSO2, and I'm sure there's a lot of things in this new tale that fans of the original can relate with and appreciate. For new players, the story will probably seem pretty overwhelming, And I'm not going to say anything becomes any clearer as you go along. But what about the actual game mechanics? Funnily enough, when I was playing on the Xbox, the performance of the game was absolutely horrid, and yet the combat was actually really fun. This is the first time I've experienced an MMO that's more based in action combat, rather than just clicking on a skill bar. And so I was just really impressed with this unique concept. Running, jumping, and even gliding are extremely satisfying, and exploring the world is really fun, especially because the graphics for the land are actually really well done, and super high quality for a game that is free to play. But after deciding to play on my gaming PC and start the game over from scratch, I was quickly dismayed because the keyboard and mouse controls are absolutely terrible. Mix that in with an ugly HUD and you just have a mess that feels more like a chore to play. I spent over 3 hours trying to play with a mouse and keyboard and hating every moment of it, and this is coming from someone that plays a ton of MMOs on my PC this way. Combat was just not as fluid or satisfying with this control scheme, no matter how I tried to wire it. So thankfully, going forward, I just hooked up my Xbox controller, and from there on out, I was good to go. I'm sure you already know what I'm going to say, but because this is a free MMO, there are microtransactions, and this game can be pretty pay to win. All of the microtransactions, or at least most of them that have to do with cosmetics, they have gacha mechanics, so it's a lot like FlyFF or Torum Online. Gacha seems to be the popular method for things like cosmetics because it gets people to spend more money, and clearly I'm just not a fan. Because the game is developed and published by Sega, I can say that it has some pretty interesting collaborations, and has even collaborated with games such as Nier Automata, and obviously things like Sonic the Hedgehog. But because this is a free MMO, the game does suffer from having too much to do. And what I mean by this is that the game throws events at you every chance that it gets, and thus quests, NPC dialogue, and item farming can get overwhelming and extremely confusing for new players just coming in because of how everything overlaps, especially in the main city. The game does have some good points. I like that the weapons can be upgraded and enhanced rather than you just needing a new weapon every few levels. I think the idea of having a subclass and main class that you can swap between to use new techniques is actually really good. And thankfully there are no classes that are locked, so you can play any class that you want on a single character, which is a model I thoroughly enjoy, especially in games like Final Fantasy XIV. I will say that I find the HUD to be cluttered and trash. No matter what options I went through, I just couldn't seem to clean it up. The game has a screenshot/pose function, but I found it very confusing to use, and it just wasn't very fun. Which is kind of depressing, because I do love taking screenshots in my games. But there is still a massive community in this game, and an active player base, so you'll never have a hard time finding someone to play with, and this does seem to be a game that does rely on you teaming up with people the further on that you get. I just wish that the leveling process wasn't so slow, because it truly does seem to take forever. Parts of the story are level locked, so grind as much as you can whenever you can. I've played this game for a few weeks in total playtime across 2 accounts, and I can't really say that I've learned anything. The game has so much to memorize and learn that I can't say that I feel proficient or comfortable with the game at all. If you were to play this game, I would highly suggest watching a tutorial or guide first to get your bearings. I suppose that in conclusion, New Genesis isn't a bad game. It's actually a pretty good game, with a lot of great things going for it. It has a deep story, a rich history, a massive community, and the developers are still involved in bringing new things to the players. I think this game will go on for many, many years to come and only get better with time, so I can see myself picking it up now and again. But other than that, I wouldn't say it's something that I'd get heavily invested in, but I can also see the allure of people who started this, and it was their first MMO, and that's why they keep coming back to it today. It's definitely something that I see people becoming nostalgic for or having nostalgia for it, and that's a great thing. I think that that means that this is a very successful MMO. And because it is so successful and has made so much money, I wouldn't doubt it if Sega made a Phantasy Star 3 online in the future sometime. But I hope that they would definitely improve upon the formula first. And I wouldn't be surprised with all the microtransactions if they made it a subbed thing, but if they keep the free-to-play option, then of course it's going to be full of microtransactions, and that's just something that we're just never going to get away from. But this is all speculation. But hey, what do you think? Have you ever played New Genesis? What sort of character did you make? And have you ever played the original PSO2 or any of the other Phantasy Star games? If so, let me know in the comment section down below. I want to thank you all so much for your support on this channel. I hope you have all had a wonderful holiday, and I hope you're staying healthy out there. Again, thank you so much. If you want to see more from me on Phantasy Star, I'll hopefully be starting a long play soon. It's just going to take some editing, and of course I'm still sick with pneumonia, so it's taking a little bit longer to heal, so I am sorry about my voice. But take care everyone, and I will see you all in the next video. Ciao you guys.